Hello and welcome to this episode of the Lost Soldiers Podcast. I am Shay Abdullah with SaveCedarGrove.org. Per the norm, here with me, Charlotte's most rhythmic historian and frontman, Dr. Tom Hanchett.
They're telling me not to tap on the table.
Well, we know you got the rhythm, Tom, and Tom's a great frontman and fiddler around town, in addition to being one of Charlotte's most adored historians, who has recently created a new book on affordable housing. He is also the creator of HistorySouth.org and our host here as well. We have a great guest today in Mr. Michael Connor, who's a local historian, grown up in the Charlotte region area, Mecklenburg County, and we're looking forward to talking to him. Tom, tell us a little bit more about this book that's hitting the stages, and what else is going on today with us?
Well, since before COVID, I got interested in affordable housing, which is increasingly scarce in every American city. And I'm a historian of Charlotte. I should know what's going on in Charlotte. And I realized I didn't. And so COVID came along, interviewed a lot of people, did a lot of research in the old newspapers and such, and created a book called Affordable Housing in Charlotte, What One City's History Tells Us About America's Pressing Problem. And it's getting really good local attention and a little bit of national attention. So every once in a while I'll say something housing-wise, but today, actually, we're back at Cedar Grove Cemetery, at least metaphorically. We're actually sitting here in the Golden Bolts TV station on the campus of Johnson C. Smith University with Josh Neipover. We're really glad to have him as our engineer. And going to talk a little history, a little bit of local theater. There's a program in Charlotte called Voices from the Past that interprets folks in cemeteries, and Michael Connor knows about that.
Well, that's great, and great transition to Michael, who we're really glad to have you here, Michael.
Thank you.
Just to give the audience a little bit of background on Mr. Connor, who is an actor who spent time in New York, Los Angeles, Indiana, of all places, as a Charlotte native. By coincidence, or even more by our good stroke of luck, Mr. Connor's a historian, but he's also an alumnus of University Park Creative Arts School, which sits just adjacent to our cemetery, Cedar Grove. Michael's grown up in town. He's got a lot of background, a lot of information on military life, in addition to, sort of how the area's come along, and he's been here for quite a while. So, Michael, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background, your attachment to some of these local areas and landmarks, and then we'll get into a good conversation here about where things are headed and what we know.
Oh, okay. Well, a little bit about myself, and it's a whole lot, but I'm going to try to make it a little bit, okay? But I did grow up in University Park, and I went to University Park Elementary School at the time, just 5 years. I was a safety patrol. I tell all the students that what I used to do. And we used to have talent shows, and that's how I got into theater, third grade. Miss Richmond would invite Miss Smith to come and watch me because everything I saw on the Ed Sullivan Show, I was doing it in class. I said, okay, for this talent show, we're going to do this. For this talent, we're going to do this. I said, oh, they got a song. I said, we're going to sing too. And I was telling the students at University Park, I said, look, guys, don't you ever give up on your career, because, it starts when you're young. You put that seed there. I said, but look, I didn't make the chorus in elementary school. I said, and I said to myself, well, they probably just had a quota, and they met the quota, and I got there a little late, so I didn't make it. I said, but I didn't get them up, because later on I started doing musicals in high school and things like that. And then I went on to study theater and did like 25 plays. Went to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, studied radio, TV, and motion pictures. And I was accepted at the North Carolina School of the Arts. I turned them down. I don't know why, but I did. And then after that, I went to undergrad school at Shaw University. And then from there to grad school at Indiana. And then I left there and went straight to Broadway and did a Broadway show that didn't last for 4 days on Broadway, but at least we were there. Got with the producers, left there, went to California. Well, I actually came back here, worked with the Ebony Group and Company here in Charlotte for a little while, and got enough money so I could fly out to California. And I didn't have enough money to come back, so I had to do something out there. I became a personal assistant to Betty Davis. And people always go, well, how was Betty Davis? And I said, well, she was kind of funny, But we had a lot of fun, working with her. Did The Color Purple. Quincy Jones wanted to know if there were musicians in Charlotte that he could work with that knew how to hold instruments. He said, they just have to hold the instruments. They don't have to play it. Well, I got in touch with Sam Davis. Sam Davis said, oh, really? Yeah, we'll be able to do that. And so when you see the juke joint scene, the musicians going to the juke joint scene, that's Sam Davis, Michael Porter, who was in my class. And the thing about it, Sam had them all rehearse music of that era. Quincy said, well, they don't need to do it, Michael. He said, nah, Sam said, no, we need to be authentic. And so when you see those guys, they upgraded them to SAG, so they get a check every time that Color Purple comes on and stuff like that.
Ooh,
Yeah.
theater stories. Theater stories. This man is rich in theater stories.
Listen, theater stories are great, and I do think that what's wonderful in setting Michael up is that he has that history here locally. We know Cedar Grove again sits adjacent to the elementary school, and I'm curious about your memories of that growing up and living in that neighborhood. What kind of role did Cedar Grove play for your young minds and then that upbringing there?
Well, right there at Cedar Grove, we had where we played baseball out there. We had some asphalt there. I got hurt, on the side of my face. Guy pushed me down and stuff. But once we got to junior high school, that was our shortcut, was to go through Cedar Grove to get there, and we had to go up a hill and everything. And being that I did track for a little while, and then I got into theater, even in junior high school, and so I have to come home by myself, and I have to go through Cedar Grove to get home and stuff.
Wow.
And everything was fine until one of our neighbors in University Park, her brother shot her and killed her, and she was buried over in Cedar Grove. Yeah, and we had all kind of, kids got imaginations. So all the time they say, oh, I saw a lady standing over there and that. And so when you're going home by yourself, and I'm a little kid and I wasn't big or anything, but it's like when we get to Cedar Grove, that's where we start running, okay? Because you want to get through there really quick, man. But my aunt had a boyfriend. He was in the Army, and so he's buried over there in Cedar Grove. And so I when growing up, it was an open grave, and we saw that it was a graveyard and all of that, and wasn't a lot of bushes or anything or trees that were really tall. It was kind of flat at that time. When as
you
as I
graduated
recall.
from West Charlotte High School, just
Yes.
around the corner, in 1969.
Yes.
So the cemetery closed in the early 70s, right, Shay?
Yeah, just shortly after that, and the legendary West Charlotte High, one of the early, I think one of the first black high schools, certainly in Charlotte. I don't know where it ranks as far as the ones across the country, but
Well, the first one in Charlotte was Second Ward.
Okay.
Then West Charlotte, came after that. And I remember my mom went to West Charlotte and stuff. And again, back to theater, they would have plays in the gym. My mom and my aunt would get me, and I don't know why they left the other kids at home, but they would take me to the gym, and I watched these plays and stuff, man, in my imagination. And then I'd go back home, and I acted out in front of my brothers and sisters. I mean, there were like 4 boys and 4 girls, so hey, I had an audience, right?
yeah,
The star was born. Michael Connor ended up much of his career teaching theater at Livingstone College, the AME Zion College over in Salisbury, about an hour from Charlotte, if you're not from around here. And as we were getting to know each other before we turned on the microphones, you were talking about your father and his many brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Talk about that for a moment.
Right. Well, see, who started the big families was actually my great-grandfather.
Wow.
My great-grandfather had 21 kids. And the last one died in 2016. She was 105, Aunt Mildred. She was the youngest kid. And the thing is, he was married twice. Actually, he was married 3 times. His first wife was Nancy Longcry, because he was born up in Lincolnton. And Nancy Longcry was probably a Creek Indian. She had about 3 or 4 kids by him. She died, they said it was fluid over the heart. They called dropsy is what she died of. And so after that, he married Sylvia Johnson at Ebenezer United Methodist Church, which is in Denver. And that church is still there. And I found his graveyard once I came back to Charlotte, because growing up, I didn't know where it was. But I did find his graveyard and everything. And he came to Limley Township, with my grandfather, who was John Connor, and John Connor Road in Cornelius is named after my grandfather. They named it there in 1992 is when it was named after him. And Grandpa had a farm. He bought 1922 125 acres of land. And so they farmed and stuff. Most of that land went underwater when Lake Norman was formed. 67.5 acres went underwater. But before that time, he had these orchards of fruit trees and things like that. And all of that we thought was for us, right? No, it was for his animals, man. He had a horse, he had mules, they had hogs, they had all these things. His watermelons were really great. But Grandpa had 8 boys and 4 girls. And then they adopted 2 more, lived with them after that. And all of the boys went to the Army, all but one. Well, actually 2, because his oldest son got killed in a saw accident. But they said, John Connor, we're going to let you keep one of your sons. Which one will it be? My father was a twin. So they kept one of the twins, let him keep one of the twins. But they sent my father to the Army, And so that's how he got sent.
Do you know
to the
where
Army.
he served?
In Norfolk. He was in Norfolk, Virginia.
Wow.
Yeah. My other 2 uncles were overseas. Uncle Arthur, I don't know where he served, but I know he was in the Army as well. Uncle Arthur was the youngest of the sons, and he was like one of the first, the second son to die, and he was in his 60s. And matter of fact, he passed away on his wife's birthday, July 2nd. Yeah.
So the military service, much of that was around World War II, or was this after World War II?
That was World War II. My great-grandfather's brother, Q Connor, his sons fought in World War I, and they were like stationed over in France. One, his name was Ralph, and Ralph was a gunman. And so when Ralph came back, there was a camp meeting in August at Morrow Chapel. And Morrow Chapel is still there to this day. It's in Mooresville. And so when he came back, they were having this camp meeting, and Sinclair, his brother, who was older than he was, got drunk. And so they called the police to come and take Sinclair out. Well, the police officer that came, so you've heard of Collinger Ford? Well, the sheriff's name was Collinger. So Sheriff Collinger comes, and Sinclair shoots at the sheriff. Doesn't hit him. And the sheriff chases him, and he's by some cars and trees and everything. And Sinclair's on the ground. Please don't kill me, don't kill me. Well, they tell Ralph that somebody's trying to kill your brother. And so Ralph gets there, and this whole crowd is around his brother, and the sheriff is standing around him, and Ralph shoots him in the back 1 time. But then he shoots him a 2nd time, and that kills the sheriff. And now this is around 1919. So Jim Crow is, just getting set in. And so they take all 3 of these brothers, because Bosie is with them as well, and they say, we're going to, hang them. So some kind of way back then, justice was upheld, and they said, we're going to appeal to the governor. And the governor was Governor Bearded, I believe, just before Governor Morrison came in, because Morrison was going to be the next governor in the 20s. And anyway, they said, okay, the governor said he would hear it. And so they went to Raleigh. And so the governor listened to them, and he said, okay, it wasn't a conspiracy, because they asked Ralph, did you guys plot to do this? He said, no. Ralph said, look, Sinclair knows had nothing to do with it. I shot that sheriff on my own because I thought he was going to kill my brother. He had nothing to do with it. And so Bearded said this, in the newspaper, News and Observer. He said, I'm a white supremacist, but my white soul would not allow me to kill all 3 of these guys because it wasn't a conspiracy. He said, but Ralph shot him and killed the sheriff. We're going to electrocute him. The other 2, we're going to give Bosie 20 years. We're going to give Sinclair 30 years. Okay, Sinclair goes to, I forget where he was, but wherever they sent him, they said in the newspaper that the guard turned his head and Sinclair got away and never did any time. And he was to be doing 30 years because Sinclair started everything. He was about 5 years older than Ralph. Ralph and Bosie were, 1 year apart and stuff. Bosie's buried at Morrow Chapel. Sinclair is buried in Flint, Michigan, because when he left, he went to where his cousins were in Flint, Michigan. Lived out the rest of his life, and he died there. Yeah.
Great stories from Michael Connor.
Yeah, really fantastic stories,
Yeah.
Michael. And thank you for making that veteran connection for us.
Okay. No
You know, one of the reasons I was really excited to have you on the show is that you have such a strong history background and the proximity to this property that we celebrate so often and our soldiers there. You know, I love that your family has that military background as well.
Right.
Our cemetery started in 1914, so we've got you know, our earliest association to military service is through Zachariah Alexander.
Okay.
And I know that you're probably well versed in that story, but he served in the Spanish-American War. Well, he also served as the secretary of the first Cedar Grove Cemetery Association.
Okay.
He also has great ties to this wonderful institution, Johnson C. Smith, which started as Biddle University. And Mr. Nypaver has been so generous to share stories with us as well about that affiliation to the military, where both of these gentlemen, Biddle and also Mr. Johnson C. Smith, were Union soldiers that came south and stayed committed to, you know, what they had fought for, which was the freedom of all people in the country, et cetera. So, I mean, what a story, right? And what a history. And for you to grow up as a historian in this really historically significant place, I think is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that you have some recollection of Cedar Grove before it was a forest
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
means a lot to me.
Definitely.
So I know you do a number of character actors, or you do a number of characters as a part of your acting. Thaddeus Tate, who has really strong attachment to Charlotte.
Right.
I believe he did serve in the military very early on.
Okay.
I forget which conflict, but tell us more about that sort of acting, what characters you've covered, and I really want to kind of get to what it meant to the community to have these veterans amongst you when they were returning from World War II, your family members, sort of what you observed as a kid. Did they come to the schools? Did you guys have parades? Do you remember talking about the service that these men gave to the country?
Right. Well, we didn't have parades or things like that. However, most of those guys that were in the military, we knew about them. They showed us pictures, especially Kenneth Greer, who was with my aunt. We got all those pictures of him in uniform and everything like that. We got a chance to see my uncles. They had pictures of their uniforms and things. My Uncle J.D., who lived to be about 99 years old, 97. Uncle Arthur, you know. So we knew they were in the Army. And I have a great niece now that goes to Spelman. And to get some money, because somebody in her family that was a veteran, we had to send that information in. And then looking up their records, finding out when they went into the Army. And not only they tell you when they went in the Army, they let you know if they had any dependents before they went into the Army. And what was one strange thing, we have an uncle that's younger than my brother, younger than my father, and when he went into the Army, he had a dependent. And we had no idea that he had a dependent. So to this day, I don't know who that is. We have to look them up. But he had a dependent when he went into the Army. And all the rest of my uncles, they didn't have any dependents. And it was strange because Uncle Lewis actually worked at Davidson College later on after he got out and stuff. And he was also a Mason. Yeah, he became a Mason. My great-grandfather also was in the Masonic Lodge as well. And that was started by James Walker Hood, who came down here from the Amy Zion Church and wanted to be a chaplain during the Civil War. And what he did was he started the Masons in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. So he brought that with him. And so when I'm doing the things at Pinewood, and we're talking about people there's Willie Smith, and Willie Smith was one of the first black architects in North Carolina who actually did that Grace Memorial Amy Zion Church. And the reason that they started that church, because, see, there was a church where Walker Hood was trying to get them to have temperance, because folks were coming together and they were drinking in the church. It was like a big social thing. It's almost like when you look in the Bible when Jesus comes and turns the money changers over, the tables over and stuff. So they were sort of doing that. And so they decided to start this church, Grace Memorial Amy Zion Church, which is still there on
It's still
Brevard
there.
Street.
It's on
right?
Brevard Street.
Okay.
It's a landmark.
So Willie Smith, the architects, the ones that were doing it, they stopped and said, well, you can't finish paying us. We're not going to do it. Willie Smith said, look, just give us the material. We'll finish the church. And they finished the church. And there's a mausoleum in Pinewood that he did of himself and one for his uncle, I think that's there as well. He also did the mausoleum for the first president of Livingstone College, Joseph Price. And actually, Willie Smith taught at Livingstone College brick masonry, and they helped build the Carnegie Library, which is still there on Livingstone's campus. There's a lot of
wonderful
historical,
stories. Wonderful
lot of
stories.
historical things.
I know Willie Smith as W.W. Smith. That's the way he showed up in the newspapers.
That's right.
And I did not realize that was part of the story that you tell at Pinewood Cemetery. Now, there's 2 municipal cemeteries that started in the mid-19th century, actually, just about the time of the Civil War. I don't think there was any connection there. Elmwood and Pinewood, 2 different cemeteries right next to each other.
Right.
Yeah, one was the white cemetery, one was the black cemetery. They are today in the center city, but in the years around the Civil War, the edge of town was no more than 4 or 5 blocks from the center of town. And so that cemetery, still a beautiful place to hang out. A generation later, people would would begin Cedar Grove Cemetery, another couple miles further out. But what Michael Connor is referring to is a cool thing called Voices from the Past.
Yes.
That a newcomer to Charlotte, Lynn Mincer, said, we used to do this back home where people would come out in the cemetery in costume and very quickly, not long rolling thing, but would tell the story of someone who was buried there. Maybe they would be related. Maybe it would be just somebody they were interested in. And so you're bringing us a little bit of that, which comes in April, I think.
That's right, in April. But we're also thinking about doing something called Voices from the Past in the Dark. And this is more about things that happened where folk got there because they were killed there. There's the boy that got killed on the train, the missing boy. They didn't know who he was, and they tried to find out in newspaper articles. They still never found out who he was. But the thing is, what I do in April, I do Thaddeus Tate's cemetery. And Thaddeus Tate, he had 5 boys and 5 girls, and his family was known as the Dozens because it was 12 of them in all.
Mom and Dad, plus 5, plus 5,
Exactly.
that's 12.
Exactly.
And Tate was the leader of the black community here, and there were other important people that he interfaced with, but the barbering was a skilled trade, and there were black barbers who served black people. There were black barbers who served white people. Thad Tate served white people, which means that he had one-on-one connections with all sorts of leading people in Charlotte. And so tell more about his story.
Yeah, because he cut the hair of Belt. He cut his hair, Ivy's hair. The governor, Morrison, he cut his hair as well. And while he was cutting hair, he was getting all these things that they were doing, and he was thinking, oh, I got to do this for my community. And so he started the investment company building.
Mecklenburg Investment Company,
Exactly.
3-story brick building on Brevard Street right next to Grace AME Zion Church by W.W. Smith.
Exactly. And he had a place now where people could meet and do businesses and things like that. J.T. Williams was also, part of his entourage of people, because Thaddeus Tate went to Grace Memorial, Amy Zion Church as well. But it's interesting about his family, though, because his daughter actually married Reverend Vernon John. Now, Vernon John worked in Birmingham, Alabama. He had a church, and when the church was over, Vernon John would go out there and put this produce out there for people to buy and eat and stuff. And the church thought that's the worst thing that they could ever do. He did not like that. They said, we need to get rid of this minister. And so they get rid of Vernon John, who was married to Thaddeus Tate's daughter. And the next person that comes in to become the minister of that church is Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
connection.
yeah. That was his first church in Birmingham,
That is
Alabama.
fascinating.
Yeah.
So fascinating, Michael. I'm so happy to have you on the show because these connections are so kind of critical to the time period and the stories that are emanating out of Cedar Grove. Tom and I have had a great chance to sort of convene and catch up on our military associations where my grandfather served, several of my cousins as well, and Tom's father also served, and that was in World War II. So we've been able to talk about that a little bit. We talked about Thaddeus Tate, and you talked about W.W. Smith, who's such an awesome story.
Yes.
We know he was one of the early architects and did a number of things to beautify and build this Black community here. What I love about, or one of the things that I really enjoy about Cedar Grove, is it opened in 1914. Most of the addresses we find there are from the old Brooklyn neighborhood. So I imagine Brooklyn may have still been happening somewhat as you were transitioning into and out of University Park Creative Arts School. So we have lots of folks buried there that carried that address, a lot of our military folks. So we're really learning about how that area affected everything. So, I mean, it's a really cool story to be able to attach that together. One of our most famous residents at Cedar Grove is Mr. R.B. Bruce. Are you familiar with Mr. Bruce?
No.
He was the pastor at Grace AME in Uptown.
And later one of the bishops in the
Really?
AME Zion Church.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's also was the founder of the first Cedar Grove. So he's a part of the Save Cedar Grove Association that included our Mr. Alexander.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
I'm stumbling because I wanted to say Fred Alexander, but Zachariah, who I'm
Right,
talking
right,
about
right.
as the sort of the namesake of that family that
Oh, yeah.
continues to move on. So a lot of people in Cedar Grove were buried by the Alexander Funeral Home.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just sort of curious about any kind of connections with that history, or if you recall just sort of how that family was represented, in the community.
Oh, man. I mean, because, see, there was a bomb in the community. They bombed Kelly Alexander's house, Fred Alexander's house, Julius Chambers. And when that happened, we felt that in the community. We felt that shake and everything. They burned a cross on West Charlotte's high school cross. And then they actually did go to the Ku Klux Klan and said, "Did you guys bomb these houses?" They said, "No, we couldn't have bombed these houses. This happened in November." They said, "No, we were planning on making plans for the Carousel Parade." Oh, it wasn't us. It wasn't us. To this day, they don't know who bombed those houses. Matter of fact, Miss Alexander Fred's daughter, actually, she says the stuff of the bombing stuff is still there in the house. The cracks and all that is there. But the thing about Fred is that Fred Alexander, 1969, well, when Martin Luther King got killed, he put up a vote because he was one of the first Black city councilmen. He put up a vote and said, "Let's make sure to take this fence down between Pinewood and Elmwood." There was a fence that divided both of these cemeteries.
And what the Black dead people and the white dead people were going to do, they needed a fence. I have no
Exactly,
idea.
exactly. So they had this big fence, and so he wanted to take it down. And so in July of that year, because King had died in April, so July that year, they had a vote, and it was a tie, and they didn't take it down. And so the thing was, they said, "Why didn't they take it down?" They said, "Well, the white people said," and this was in the Charlotte Observer, "if we take it down, the blacks are going to come over here and mess up our floral decorations. Now, the only time we're going to be at the graveyard is when the folk dying, and we're going to be out of there. We ain't coming back." But anyway, what happened in January 1969, they had a vote again. One of the councilmen were out, and it was a tie again, but Stan Brookshire was the mayor, and he had the deciding vote, and he voted that we take it down. Now, don't forget, 1969, January, that's the first man landing on the moon, okay? So it's important times that this was happening. And so they decided to take the fence down at that time, and they did.
And that's one of the reasons why some place like Cedar Grove, which was Black owned, Black run, it didn't have that kind of in-your-face disrespect.
Right.
Elmwood and Pinewood, which were municipal cemeteries, but there were also this fence in the middle there. And so the self-determination, the pride the honor of the dead. Cedar Grove, very important if you see the wider context. That's what we're hearing today.
Exactly.
Big time. And when we were setting up to get started today, we touched on a topic that we talk about often, and that's Camp Green.
Oh, yeah.
And what happened in there. And I know you have some information about Camp Green or some associations with some of the folks that may be interred
Right.
at Cedar Grove. And again, what I really love about the history you're able to share, Mike, although it's not, military specific, like what was happening in this community and how people felt and those memories of running through Cedar Grove, where now it's a place that you can walk. And it's not that scary. It's
Right,
quite
right.
majestic when we get in there and learn who's there and what they were responsible for. The whole military angle is really fun and sexy. These guys went all over. We talk a lot about my grandfather, who served with a gentleman named Wendell French, who's buried in Cedar Grove.
Okay.
Which is fascinating. Those guys were in Wales and England, as far as we know, the UK. But I took a closer look at that book, Tom, and they also were in the Philippines.
Wow.
Which was pretty fantastic that they spent time in Manila, of all places. And I just can't imagine being a 20-year-old, right, in the, I guess that would be the early 40s or so, just packing up,
Okay.
leaving Jim Crow, leaving all that stuff behind and going to Manila. I mean, give me a break.
Yes.
So what I'd love to hear more from you about is, tell us a little bit about this sort of Camp Green Association, what you know about that and how that really drove the military participation of the African-American communities, really as a whole.
Right, right. Because a lot of soldiers came, from different places. Like Greg, he was like from South Carolina, so they came up. My great grandfather's brothers' sons, they came from different parts of Mooresville and up in the Statesville, all those places, all came to Camp Green before they left and stuff. When I was doing research, especially on my great grandfather's brothers' sons, I had no idea that one of them went to France, but when his mother died, they had him come back. And he was able to attend the funeral because she died of pneumonia. And then after that, they sent him back to France.
Wow.
And then he got, discharge, honorable discharge, like March or April of that year. And that's the year when he went to the camp meeting and stuff like that later on. But when I think of that, in my, talk about the Philippines, I had an uncle that was in front, based in the Philippines, the one that had the dependent. So I don't know. He was trying to get away from his brothers. He didn't want to talk about it, okay? But two of the uncles actually, they actually went to Germany and stuff. And one of them worked with the Tuskegee Airmen. That was Uncle Garfield. Uncle Garfield, he always used to say, "Michael, why am I living this long, I said, I don't know, man, because you weren't the most favorite uncle. But he was born 1919, and he lived to 2019. He was 100 years old. He said, Michael, go in that closet. You can get some shoes and stuff, man. His feet were like 13s. I couldn't wear shoes. But he was fun, all these guys, they had their own stories, because that uncle would go to Georgia with the folk that he served with every year, and they have this camaraderie thing that they would do, and then come back, and then once they started dying and stuff, he did less visits and stuff, but he got around and he told us, about some of those stories and stuff, and most of those stories we got them when we went to the camp meetings. And right now, next month, there'll be camp meetings at Tucker's Grove and all those places. And some of those people be coming back from places, because they didn't want to come and stay here, But when you think about North Mecklenburg is totally different from the city of Charlotte, that Mecklenburg. It's totally, because when we used to leave, and it was a straight shot when the water wasn't here, to go to Grandpa's house. It was like straight up Batersford Road. We were right there, man. And a lot of kids had never been to a farm and stuff. And then when my folks started the Lakeview Country Club up there, then they had somewhere to go, and they were around the waters and stuff. But yeah, man, the Army thing, though, I mean, that was, so, I mean, they did so much in politics, but they wanted you to go to the Army. We had Boy Scouts. Up in North Mecklenburg, there was a heavy thing of Boy Scouts up there all the time, man. And they did things. Not only did they stay in the area, they went on outings, you know. They went to, you know, different states and stuff just for those kids and stuff. Like here in Charlotte, we was regulated, you know, because of the red lining. So we had Double Oak swimming pool and stuff and things like that. We played checkers and we had checker contests and things like that. But growing up, we had fun. We had what we call Dead Man's Cave. Dead Man's Cave was like you just go through this here tunnel from one side of the freeway of 85 to the other side of the freeway. and if wasps were in there, they would bite you and we would get out. And we never let our parents know about these things. Alcohol was cheap. It was like 10 cents. So if we got stung, we know we're doing alcohol, you know. So it was those things that we had so much fun at. And like right there where the graveyard was, like I said, we played baseball there. We had things we call rolling bat and stuff. So you hit the ball so far, if it goes out in the field, you into the graveyard, you got to say, roll over before you, because you're too far in the field to get it back in, you know. So if you say roll over before people say no rollovers, you can get a rollover and stuff, you know. So we had fun out there, you know. So it wasn't a frightened. We weren't frightened by the place so much as unless we were alone by ourselves. As long as we were in a group, we were okay. But
well, one of the things I like to do on the show, Michael, as we get closer to wrapping up here, is I like to share some of the names, lift them up of our veterans that live in Cedar Grove. So I think that it'll be fun to do with you because, you know, one or two of these names might spark some memories that you have about this. So there was, I'm going to start in our D's here. We had John E. Dickinson. He was born in 1885, lived till about 1960. Frank Faust was one of our veterans, born 1893. And he lived till about 1962.
Wow. I had a student, Juanita Faust. She may have been in that Poverty family, yeah.
Charlie Lee Franks is another that we had. 1919, he was born. He lived to about 1961. And Wendell Walter French, who we mentioned earlier, served with my grandfather, Albert Britt, in the same war that Tom's father served in as well. Tom's dad was in Africa, that we found out, which is really cool. Perry William Glenn. As another one, he was in 1933 to 1960, so he didn't live too long, but long enough to serve.
Right.
And then Kenny Greer Jr.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that is a name that might spark some memory for you.
Definitely. Yeah, that was my aunt and stuff, and he stayed in those row houses where I guess they've torn them down there, where the police department is. He stayed there in those row houses. That was Kenny Greer.
Right there on Beatty's Fort.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you something funny about that is that I didn't know that there are row houses there. Did you know that, Tom?
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So just up the road, maybe a block and a half from there, is a mosque now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But that mosque was Wendell French's home.
Oh, okay.
That was the address on his burial records indicates that current mosque just 2 blocks from there.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, the cool thing is that these people were a part of that neighborhood. And when I'm there and what fascinates me about Cedar Grove is that the connections are just massive and, you know, really touch on the leadership that brought that community into the present day,
right,
and continue to give it sort of that really strong backbone of kind of survival. It's not a today thing. They didn't just come up with that on their own a couple years ago, and it was you know, relevant throughout the 60s and places like that. I think that's a good place to touch with Tom here about kind of what was happening up here. Like what you know, I mean, people had to come here. We're kind of relegated here to some extent, but what did they do with that? Like, what are some big moments that might have happened up here, Tom?
I'll have to go home and think about that a little bit. Folks remember the football games. West Charlotte, basically, the alumni in the neighborhood had to build their own playing fields because the white school board was not going to do that. There was a little drive-in restaurant, which eventually became Rudine's. You remember Rudine's?
Oh, yeah,
wow.
Rudine's, yes.
And there was a lot of pride and a lot of activity along Beatty's Ford Road. Today, there's still activity because the neighborhood worked really hard on making sure it was not a food desert. So church and a number of churches, a number of different kinds of stores. Food Lion is up that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so all of that. But that's something we should talk about that more
Yeah.
on one of our future shows.
Yeah, and I think we will, Tom. We'll have a great opportunity about
Yeah.
that. We've talked about the significance of Johnson C. Smith University, what that's meant to the corridor, but also these schools we've touched on, West Charlotte High, Second Ward,
Northwest Junior High.
Northwest Junior High.
Yep. I went to junior high school there. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, I mean, literally what happened with a lot of those schools is those gentlemen became servicemen. So I think there's quite the legacy
Right.
with Camp Green, with what we're learning by looking at our Cedar Grove soldiers,
Oh, yeah.
is that, the military was a great opportunity for many. Tom and I, with his new book out, really touched on the fact that housing was really affected by
Oh yeah.
the military. So, tying those two things together is fascinating, especially while we're in sort of a affordable housing crisis at the moment. And Beatty's Ford is a part of that story still.
Oh yeah.
So, I just love having you on the show. We appreciate you sharing your insight with us. I want to give you a moment to share any parting words that you want to give to the audience, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, well, growing up in Charlotte and everything, one thing I do remember is the businesses that they had. We had the McKissick Shoe Shop, we had the Igloo where we would go get ice cream and stuff, Alexander and Sons. When right across the street was the father, when our bikes would get messed up and we have flat tires, we go over there and get them fixed. They didn't put the patches on and stuff like that. The two cookies for a penny, little butter cookies and stuff. And that building is still there. The Grand Theater, that was right there by the Johnson C. Smith and stuff, where we got our haircuts and things like that. The movie theater where we could, come. There were actually two movie theaters. No one talks about the Ritz so much because I was close to Northwest. But the Grand, they always talked about the Grand and stuff. And Mr. Nugent would come in there with his flashlight, put your feet down, all this stuff. So we had all those things. And I never, because Second Ward, they had the Savoy and all those things. What we did do when it comes to theater, we would take our plays that we would do at West Charlotte and take them over to Second Ward and do the same play. And our sets were built with cardboard because we had a manufacturing company that had this big cardboard and they didn't need it and they would give it to us and we'd paint those cardboards and make the walls for our sets and things like that. It was great, growing up. And I just hope that the creativity stays in people's minds and their imagination takes them further into the future because there are a whole lot of things that they can be done.
Well, that's great, Michael, and thank you for sharing that with us and diving into stories of our veterans at Cedar Grove. We've learned quite a bit and really been able to connect some dots here. Tom,
Thank you,
what do we
Josh
need to know?
Nypaver. Really appreciate your being our engineer. Really grateful to Johnson C. Smith and the Golden Bowls TV studio, to Veterans Bridge Home, Wreaths Across America.
Yeah, those are our people that have been significant players. We're really happy to be here at JCSU and the history that they hold related to Cedar Grove and the community. It's always great to share those things and to our veteran service. So, Tom, as always, pleasure to be here with you, chopping it up about the local history. Mr. Nypaver, thank you as well. Big shout out to it's not Mrs., it's Dr. Valerie Kinlock, president of Johnson C. Smith University.
And Cheryl Brayboy.
Dr. Cheryl Butler Brayboy, Dr. Cheryl Curtis, who runs the Military Veteran Services here, and so many more. A big shout out to the Beatty's Ford community. Thank you for your support in getting this Save Cedar Grove project up and running and continuing to thrive. So we look forward to joining you next time. Thank you, everyone. This has been Lost Soldiers.